Every sales conversation is a missed or captured opportunity. Which will your next one be? Welcome to the Fripp Virtual Training User Meeting. We are so excited to have you. And remember, the purpose of our user group meetings is, one, to add more value to your membership and to encourage you that 10 minutes a week can make a difference to your presentation skills. You know Paul, he is not only our moderator, he is our director of client experience. If you have any problems or challenges or need a kick in the pants, Paul is also available to you. And he will now tell you how you can engage with us and introduce our first poll. Take it away, Paul.
Hello, everyone. As a reminder, on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a chat window. In that chat window, you can enter your short, specific questions to be answered during the call. In addition, our polling questions will appear in that same area. When the polling question appears, you'll click your answer, select vote, and then click the chat tab to return to the chat. So we'll start.
All right.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Paul, I'm talking over you, as is my habit on occasions. So why don't we introduce the first poll, which is going to ask them, Paul, if they have confidence in their storytelling ability. And how long do they have to answer that very complex question, Paul?
We'll give you about a minute. Just click yes or no and then click vote.
Perfect. Our subject is stories, however, more specifically, third-person endorsement stories. This is a very valuable sales technique, certainly to be used by sales professionals in sales conversations, demonstrations, and presentations. Also for professional speakers who might be delivering a presentation, let's just say on customer service. However, they use presentations to drive business for their consulting business. So within your presentations, you're going to give examples of how you consult with other individuals. So this is a tool that we can all use. My recommendation is to have a handful of stories that would relate to every demographic you serve or every size company or complexity of projects. So for example, I coach individuals, I coach sales teams, I coach executives, we coach virtually, and we have a community where we help multiple people. So within a conversational presentation, I can certainly include a story of a successful client in any area. If you are selling software, you might want to have a client that represents a small client, a medium-sized client, a large client. And you also want stories about how, when a client says yes, what the process is you go through. Now, Paul, do our wonderful VT users have confidence in their storytelling ability?
Well, 86% said yes, and that leaves 14% that said no.
And perhaps the 14%, if you have a comment that you want help with. So for example, why are you not confident? If there's an area you need help with, type it in the notes and we will answer it later. Congratulations to the 86% of you. So my challenge, of course, is to give you ideas that perhaps would go beyond what you now know or do and give you even more confidence. One, we now know the importance of them. Two, the question I frequently am asked is, Patricia, I can tell great stories, but where do I get the clients to talk about? Especially I'm new in business. If you just put up your shingle, let's say to be a consultant or a trainer, You have satisfied clients, even if they were internal when you had a job as perhaps an internal trainer, or if you've helped give your friends advice on the subject and everyone is encouraging you to now put up your shingle and do this professionally, you have examples. For those of us who are in business and have been in business for a long time, or for our corporate clients, look at your website, look at your marketing materials, and I promise you, you will find all the names and very often the quotes that your satisfied clients gave you that you can now use. What you might also do is, if I were going to ask you, could you give me a reference of a client like me that I could talk to? The people you always refer, why don't you call them up and say, Paul, I never get tired of telling the story about how we turned around your sales team, blah, 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 blah. So whatever you did, would you mind telling me in your words how the results have been? Would you remind me what you felt your challenge was when we first started? What do you hear from your sales team now that they have these new skills? So what you are doing is pulling out information, and I suggest you record the conversation, because when you use this story or example, you want to edit to the nub, to the drama. So they're very easy to find and develop. And if you have any questions about any of this, just please put them in your notes section, and Paul will read them to me in a little while. The ingredients of your third person endorsement story would be very much the same as any other story you might use in a presentation. Stories are about people, flesh and blood characters that we can relate to. And if you're doing this in a sales situation, if your happy client, when you first talked to them, if they had called you and said, help, how would they have then described their challenge? And you might say, but Patricia, we talked to these people for 2 months before we even got to do a proposal. I understand that. What we have to do is make your story more dramatic by shrinking it to digestible, acceptable length. And I always like to start with help, because one of my friends, and you might be familiar with the story, one of my friends from the Fairmont Hotel called and said, Patricia, help. As you know, I am a great salesperson one-on-one. However, I have the opportunity to present to a convention committee that's considering coming to San Francisco for the convention. They're going to be 10 of them, and I'm really nervous when I stand up before a group of people. What shall I do? And because he was smart enough to say help, it helped him articulate his problem. So within all your stories, as an exercise, as a discipline, look at, if they had said help, how would they articulate the problem? Now, what you can do, if you in fact are calling some of your past clients, you might ask them, if your first call had been help, how would you have told me your problem was? It's just a great way to start. Because what we want to do in our third person endorsement stories is start with the situation. And your character, your flesh and blood character who has the problem that matches the person you're talking to, we need to deliver the problem in their dialogue. Now, you might be thinking, but Patricia, we are in financial services, or our clients don't like us to actually mention their names, or as some of my clients say, they don't want anyone to know they actually have an executive speech coach. So what you do in that case, you cannot lie about the problem or what you did or the results you got. You can't exaggerate. What you can do is say, this was a $2 billion software company with aspirations of being 20 billion, rather than this was a large manufacturing firm. So the size or the complexity needs to match. Your executive could be called John, where in reality it was Susan. So everything else is true. You just hide who the actual client is. That's the situation in their words. The solution, which is what you actually do for your clients and what you did for them, you can do in your words. So what we did for John was we first went through the first step of our 4-step process. We did this, then this, this, this. Now, what you are doing in this example is you are answering the unspoken question of your prospect. And that is, if we said yes, what is the process you would go through? So, for example, in my case, it would be with sales presentations. Well, first, I want to listen to some of your sales conversations. I suggest you have absolutely the best people at telling your story. If everyone was good as that, you wouldn't be looking for a speech coach. Perhaps you also want to give me a couple of people who are not as good, and if we can't turn them around in this training, they won't be working for you anymore. So I can see the difference. Then we will re-script and tighten what your best professionals are saying, and we will introduce these ideas in a web event. We will set some expectations for preparation for the in-person training and coaching, and then we will build in follow-up that includes virtual training for repetition and reinforcement. So that is my process. So of course, if I'm telling a story of my client I worked with, I would explain the steps. Then we go back to the character. So situations in their words, solution is in your words. What is your process that you did? And then just last month, I spoke to John and he said, Patricia, I would not have believed it possible that we could train our sales professionals in such a fun, entertaining way that totally engaged them, and we could maximize all their activities by tightening their presentations. And within 3 weeks from one sale, we covered the entire cost of training, including bringing our salespeople to Omaha. Now, the happy ever after, the success always needs to be the words of the satisfied clients. And then later in the presentation, you might say, well, Paul, if you like what you heard, we would love you to have the same results that John is boasting about. When shall we get started? Or what do you think our next logical step is? So although we are talking about one segment of your sales conversation or presentation, it of course all flows and goes together. Now, with that, Paul, are there any questions or comments that have come in?
Yes, actually, Matthew asked, when is a great time to ask for an endorsement?
That is a great question. Obviously, when you have a happy client is a great time. What you can do, though, is set up as part of your process. So you might say, Paul, well, this would be your investment and your commitment that if we meet or exceed your expectations, you will give us a glowing endorsement that we can put on our website. So that could be part of your proposal. In fact, that's a pretty good idea. And like all good ideas, this is an idea we frequently use and sometimes we forget. And this is one of the reasons we have repetition and reinforcement with our user meetings and FrippVT, is to remind you what you've already forgotten that you absolutely loved when you first heard it or started doing it. So are there any more questions or comments?
Not right now.
Well, what I'm going to encourage you to do is think, what is your specific question around stories, especially third-person endorsements? And Paul and I are happy to analyze and critique, let's say, the first 5 opening lines of your sales presentations, or how you actually segue into the first line of your story. So if you want to do that, we'll promise to do 5. And with that, Paul, let's also put up a poll, which is the second poll we have.
Will you commit to 10 minutes per week to improve your presentations?
And you might be thinking, well, Patricia, your FrippVT user meeting is usually more than 30 minutes. Does that mean we have 3 weeks off? No, is the quick answer. No, it is not. So as you're looking at stories, these are a few to-dos for you. 1, go to your website, your marketing materials. And what I find amazing, especially with corporate clients that have fabulous websites and glossy marketing materials in a time when many companies have everything online. And I'll often quote somebody who is in these beautiful glossy brochures, and people look at me, that's good, where did you get it? Page 3 of your annual report. So there are many materials that we have that we've either created ourselves or our marketing departments have created for us that we are not maximizing. And Paul, do we have an answer? And I believe it was 100%.
Yes, 100%, yes.
To 10 minutes a week. Well, that means 10 minutes a week represents 1 chapter of 1 course of your Fripp virtual training. And we promise you that FrippVT is a way to easily, conveniently, and quickly improve your presentation skills. You've made the investment. We just challenge you. Perhaps you want to put it on your calendar or consider it a reward with the idea of FrippVT, repetition and reinforcement. Because just because you might have even heard ideas before doesn't mean it's part of your everyday conversation. So, Paul, do we have any opening lines or questions?
Not right now. And actually, Mel did mention to share your aha moments on Twitter and make sure you use hashtag FrippVT.
Oh, well, wonderful. Mel, of course, is our director of social media. And she would probably remind me to tell you, and it was part of your introduction, but we now have a new FrippVT LinkedIn community, and you don't actually have to be a VT user, so you could invite your friends, but it's very active with sharing ideas and stimulating conversation around presentations. And Paul will certainly send that to you. Now, we are very aware how busy individuals are, And although we always invite you and remind you to FrippVT user meetings, we do have other meetings that are open to your friends as well. And in case you are interested, tomorrow we will be delivering a Superstar Sales Presentations web training where we will look at the whole format of the sales conversation. And Paul, in case you want to sign up, remember you do not have to be available at that time to participate. If you register, you get the link. And then next week, and we will be sending you an invite to this, I'm interviewing Joanne Black, who is the author of No More Cold Calls. And she is an expert at asking for referrals. And as she said, no more cold calls. So she's very good at getting to the conversation. Whereas we pick it up once you got the conversation, what do you say? So again, that is open to the public. It's a bonus if you would want to sign up, and we will certainly send that off to you. Now, Paul, any opening lines or questions? I cannot believe people are not taking advantage of this great Fripp advice. We won't mention your whole name if that's what's holding you back.
We don't have any yet. I think it's probably just the time it takes for them to type it in.
All right, good. Well, let's look at, we also have another, we'll give you another poll. Our next VT user meeting will be on October the 5th. And we're going to have this later in the day because we try and satisfy as many people's calendars. And we are giving you a choice. Would you like the subject to be? What are their choices, Paul? We're giving them 4.
Speech structure, finding content, opening lines, or you-focused language.
And depending on what gets the highest amount of votes, that's what will be the subject. So let's go back to our subject while you're thinking and typing up your opening line or deciding what you want to hear next. Here is a great technique that will help you speak in dialogue. And that is to put your name at the beginning of the conversation. So, for example, Pat said, Patricia, as you know, we are a $2 billion software company with aspirations to be $20 million. We have a very important sales meeting in January. We have 1,500 salespeople from around the world coming to the Bellagio, and we need them to know that they are working with the right company at the right time and that their future is bright. Our strategy is sound. Now, can you see what I have done with that? One, it is very obvious the client, although she did not say help, she clearly articulated the problem. And by saying, Patricia, it helps me and the listeners know who is speaking. So that is one of the best techniques. I'm going to give you another, and this was working with one of my clients, Chandra. As you know, a course, if you haven't taken it recently, go back to Specificity Builds Credibility. When your characters speak, what you are going to do is clarify and specify what they said. For example, my friend Darren LaCroix just sent out his latest newsletter, and he was reporting on our conference, Lady and the Champ Summer. And the first endorsement to promote this event and sell the MP3s to it was amazing conference, so much great stuff. And I sent Darren an email saying, you couldn't have taken a better quote. Now, this is another question. If you give me a quote, and many of you give me great quotes about how much you like FrippVT, And if you haven't, I encourage you to. I take what it is you've actually said. And I would say, don't worry about having the grammar, because we have the English school teacher. Make sure the commas are in the right place before we put it on the website. But what I'm going to do is make it more specific. So you might say, FrippVT is the best training I've ever had. When it goes on the website, I would probably say FrippVT is the best presentation skills training. And if I know you, I might say, based on my 20 years experience as a sales leader, FrippVT. So you see, I'm taking some poetic license. So you take what your characters said and you make it specific, and you make it clear and more concise. And with that, what would they like? Nobody likes, well, only 6% want speech structure. So you focus language. No opening lines is 38%. Is that right, Paul?
Yep, that was the top one.
Good. So can you make a note that our October meeting, Paul, will be opening lines, and then you focused language will be the session after that? Good. Do we have any questions or comments?
We do.
Wonderful.
Elaine gives an example of what she uses when she segues into a story. She says, it reminds me of a story.
Okay. Thank you, Elaine. And I would recommend you don't tell people you're going to tell them a story. What you might do say, and that would work. And how do you know which is right and which is better? Or do they both work equally well? You test it. So what I'm going to suggest you say next time is, this reminds me of a challenge. When Pat first called me, or this reminds me of one of my successful assignments, or this reminds me of a time I felt like a superhero. Now, again, I would suggest you write these down, and if you ask me to repeat them, I might have a problem because I was in the moment. But let's look. I believe the first one, Paul, that reminds me of a challenge. Because if you're going to tell a story of how you helped somebody, then it was a challenge for them. And then at the end of the story, you could say, it was a challenge for John's company. For me, it was just another day consulting. In other words, I eat challenges for lunch. All right, what's the next one, Paul?
The next one comes from Claudette. She just has a question. She wants you to discuss which were the $100 words in the intro to the Seventh-day Adventists.
All right, good. Well, the opening is this, and to put this in context, when we speak to an audience, and in this case, it was Seventh-day Adventist pastors, I know they were looking at the program thinking, this is the only speaker who isn't a minister. And as the subject was how to design and deliver more charismatic sermons, she isn't a minister. How can anyone who isn't a minister tell me how to write a better sermon? I write one every week, and I bet she isn't even a Seventh-day Adventist, which I'm not. With our opening line, and may I also suggest with our stories, we are building credibility that we can be of value. So that opening line was 465 times in the Bible, it said it came to pass. It did not say it came to stay. And unless your sermon is well constructed, artfully crafted and charismatically delivered, it will not come to stay in the hearts, minds, and lives of your congregation. So hopefully you could hear the words that I punched. They would be the $10 words. They would be the most important words. And as we are talking about this, and you will find in FrippVT, we talk about picture words and connecting words. What are the important words? You might also think of action words. This is what drives your presentation and your conversation. Paul, more questions or opening lines?
Yes. Let's see here. We've got from Joan. This is her opening line. Every day I discover something new. I see things all around me that I've taken for granted, and then suddenly someone or something lifts the veil and I see the world in a new and exciting way.
Okay, good. Give me, Paul, and I know exactly what we're doing in sentence 2. Give me the first line again.
Every day I discover something new.
Okay. Perhaps stop there. So you could say, isn't life exhilarating? Every day we have the opportunity to learn something new. So what you are doing is making your experience bigger and inviting the audience that it is their experience as well. Because if you will remember, if there is one secret of delivering a good presentation or being persuasive in sales, it is to make your subject of interest to the audience. And when they are part of it, you are talking a universal experience. They are more engaged. The second line.
I see things all around me that I have taken for granted, and then suddenly...
Okay, no, stop there. I have seen things all around me. Things is a lazy noun. What is more dramatic than things? I don't know. I see. Could you perhaps... You experience new sensations. You see the world through fresh eyes. So look at, what do you mean by things? And if you went through a day, you start with, for me, there is no reason to get up in the morning except to drink my French press coffee. In fact, I could start a speech. What would the world be like without coffee? I did start one speech with, what would the world be like without television? Because the theme, it sounds as if I'm going into opening lines, Paul, doesn't it? Because the theme of the conference was around television. And then as it was for the American Payroll Association, my concluding line was, what would the world be like without the American Payroll Association? Because for payroll managers, their world would not be nearly as good without their association. And so after that, so Paul, so I'm expanding. How can you make it better than things? And the next line was,
all around me that I have taken for granted. And then suddenly someone or something lifts the veil and I see the world in a new and exciting way.
Well, again, I am suggesting you make this universal. So you find a way to script it that would include their experience. And if you do that with the first line, it will be easier to follow through. Good. More opening lines or questions?
Yes, we have Matthew from from First American Home Warranty.
Hey!
And his opening is directed to real estate agents. And it starts, "It's freezing," my wife said, waking me from a deep sleep. I
Okay,
woke up.
stop there. Stop there. That sounds good, Matthew, but it sounds written. It doesn't sound spoken. So, because what you said is, "It's freezing," my wife said. If you were reading in a book, it'd be that way. So how about start with, "My wife elbowed me awake and said it's freezing." So I want you to say that, Paul. My wife elbowed me awake.
My wife elbowed me awake and said, "It's freezing."
Now, what is his next line?
I woke up and realized our home was unusually cold.
Okay. No, honey, Matthew, if your wife elbowed you, what you did, okay, I woke up, and you can woke up and said, "She's right." And again, you don't have to tell the truth. You can exaggerate for humor. This is a comedy line. It's cold. She wouldn't have again. Okay. I woke and realized you could have what's a meat locker. I know one of my friends came into my house and said, "Okay, you could store meat in here. That's it." And so what I'm suggesting you do is say, "Matthew, I will go say she was right. You could have stored meat in here." So so you're absolutely on track with the drama and start immediately in the scene. Because what Matthew does, you have maybe 3 or 4 minutes or a 5-minute presentation, so you don't waste time. And what he is doing is then gives him a perfect example to that's the drama, and then go into a story, which is really when your clients have our product, they won't be calling you, they'll be calling us. So that's great. Any more?
That looks like that's the only opening lines we have. Matthew included more aspects of his presentation.
Okay, well,
those are all. Okay. And then, have you ever walked through the ups and downs of a real estate transaction with your buyer?
Okay, stop there. Have you ever? And thank you, Matthew, because you're demonstrating a couple of items. One, how you can take what could be individual opening lines and put them together. So you're going to start with the scene and then ask them a question. But you said, "Have you ever?" That assumes you've had the problem once. When you let people know it's a frequent problem, so how often have you? Now they know this, they want the solution, because it happened not just once, it happens every week. So that's how you would make that change. How often have you? Next part.
Walk through the ups and downs of a real estate transaction with your buyer just to have them experience trouble.
Okay. I would cut that into a couple of different ideas. So how often have you walked through and I'd say the intricate steps, and then stop there. 2 weeks later, the honeymoon is over and they got a problem. So by walking through the steps and the problem, think of it as 2 different sentences, 2 different ideas. And the best advice we can give you is 1 thought per sentence. If something changes, imagine new sentence or semicolon. Wonderful. Now, this is your chance for your short, specific questions or your opening lines. So that while that's coming, let's Paul, you will remind them afterwards with the LinkedIn group if they want to go join, and you can certainly unjoin. And if Melanie wants to write any comments that Paul will read about our LinkedIn group, and if you have any pithy ideas or thoughts from our training here, if you want to tweet them, hashtag FrippVT, you are very welcome to. You committed to 10 minutes a week, which means as we go in, everyone who signed up is live, or hopefully who will watch the replay, we can see a spike in your activity to at least 10 minutes, one chapter per week. At the end, Paul will direct you to tomorrow's session, which is the whole sales presentation outline. May I remind you, it's all in Superstar Sales Presentations. If you haven't completed it, that might be a great place for you to go next. And then we will mail you an invite if you would like to sit in or get the replay of my interview with Joanne Black. That will be Wednesday of next week, 12 noon California time. Paul, any questions and comments?
We have another opening line.
Good. From
Joy. Her opening is, can you imagine being at a baseball game and there was no scoreboard? You wouldn't.
Oh, I love it. Yes, I love it. And what you would do, and I know you're just reading it, Paul, which is your role. A lot of this is how you deliver it. So what would you do? Can you imagine being at a baseball game? And give people a couple of seconds to think, yeah, I can, with no scoreboard. Pause, pause, pause. Give them time to see it or be confused. That'd be crazy. What's her next part?
You wouldn't know when it was over or who won.
Good.
Scoreboards are key to every game, including your business.
Love it. Very good. And I am sure you might find some of our other users might adapt that for themselves, which in fact, Melanie, I believe our next discussion for the FrippVT FrippVT LinkedIn page should be, what is your favorite opening line? And I do commit that I will give comments on every single one. So did Mel give any comments for us to announce?
Not yet. She did provide the link to the LinkedIn meeting, the LinkedIn group earlier in the chat, and I'll include that in an email to everyone afterwards.
Okay, perfect. So with that, let's do a quick review. Third-person endorsement stories are probably your most powerful tool. We need to have at least one in our back pocket that represents every demographic that we serve. If you're giving keynote speeches, then you can certainly include them to demonstrate that I'm here to deliver a speech on this. However, I consult, I train, I have a virtual platform on this skill, whatever you want to promote. Look at your own materials, your website, your brochures, and look through and see what is already provided that your clients have already okayed that you can use. Look at your favorite or most successful clients in the last 6 months, call them up and ask them the questions. When you first called me, if you had said help, how would you have articulated your problem? And then again, and this is, hey, here's an idea. When you talk about our training, consulting, your product, pause, and please do, what do you tell them? And then you can actually critique them. Well, thank you, Matthew. We appreciate that. Perhaps next time you'd like to say it this way. And do you give out my phone number or my business card? along with the recommendation. One technique that you can use is to put your name in the opening dialogue with your client so it keeps you on track. And it's the situation, solution, success. Situation, success is always words of your happy clients. And Paul, any other questions or comments?
Well, there is another opening line.
Oh, great.
We've got Joanne. You see it in the news. Reports every day of violent shootings, rapes, riots, and no end in sight. Would it surprise you to learn that the real rate of violence in the United States has decreased, has been in the decline for the past 30 years? Good news, right? So maybe you're wondering now why you've signed up for this self-defense class. Because
I love it. I love it. Let's go back to the very first part and just deliver it a sentence at a time. I would sign up, Joanne.
You see it in the news.
Okay, good. You've seen it in the news. Okay, good. And what you could do is you've read it in the news and you've watched it. Because what you could do, the headlines say, you could do headlines, and then you could do what we hear on the headlines say, the broadcaster tells you. And if you did that, you would do it 3 ways, but there's nothing wrong with what you've done. Good. Next part. Paul?
Reports every day of violent shootings, rapes, riots, and no end in sight.
Good. I would put every day at the beginning of the sentence, because if you'll remember, time is always a setup phrase. So that would make the sentence, Paul, every day.
Every day there are reports of violent shootings, rapes, riots with no end in sight.
Good. And what I would do, riots, and then I would pause and say, and there is no end in sight. Pause. Let that sink in. You've just done a marvelous job at making me aware of what's on the news, and it's beginning to twig, well, and it could happen to me. Now, you're not saying that, but you're setting it up that they are going to think that, and you give them a moment to realize. Next line.
Would it surprise you, excuse me, would it surprise you to learn that the real rate of violence in the U.S. has decreased?
Okay, good. Good. Next part.
It has been on the decline for the last 30 years.
Okay, so that's it. For the last 30 years, it's been on the decline. So if you will remember, and this is in FrippVT, so even if you've watched it, you need to be reminded 10 minutes a week. Time is always a setup phrase. And what comes at the end of the sentence is the impact phrase, the punch word, the punch phrase. And what is most important comes at the end. So for the past 30 years, it's been on the decline. And perhaps it is because individuals like you are taking charge of your lives and learning to stand up and protect yourself. Good. Wonderful. We really appreciate your contribution. And remember, as part of our user meetings, we usually do some in-the-moment coaching, which is why we would rather present a small segment of your presentation so we can make it open to you. Paul, any more questions and comments?
Mel mentioned that she has started the opening line discussion in the LinkedIn group. And then Mike has an intro to his website.
Good.
He would like to critique. On the website, it starts, you've come to Q9 Consulting, your source for forensic document examination.
Good. I like that, Mike. However, what you might want to do is put a challenge in front of it. And so perhaps you could articulate, although everyone might be interested in the website, if they know what problem you're going to solve at the beginning, they'll know if they're in the right place. And believe me, this is all our promotions and our websites are works in progress. And all you can do is test. If you've been to FrippVT recently, and Fripp, we're always working at tweaking. So, for example, now our line is, when your message must be memorable, your presentation powerful, and your sales successful. We can help. And articulating what you can do in one sentence is a real skill that is constantly needing honing. Any more questions or comments, Paul?
Claudette asked, is time always a setup? What if the decline in time is the point?
Then in that case, it probably would be the end. So for example, if sign up today, if today is the only day in history, it might be, and it might shock you to know that that if that was the last thought, if that is the resonating thought that has a unit of time, then it would go at the end. As a general rule, 95% of the time, it will be a setup phrase. There are always exceptions. Any more, Paul?
That looks like that's about it.
Well, good. And I believe we have one more polling question, don't we?
We certainly do. And that polling question is, do you find FrippVT user meetings to be a benefit of your membership?
So that's easy, yes and no. And we certainly hope it's yes. Perhaps if it's no, people will have already tuned out. 100% said yes. If anyone left, maybe they would be the no's. So thank you. Then if 100% of you find it a benefit, they will continue. Our goal, of course, is always to add value to your membership and make me as available as possible. However, we still would love to see you 10 minutes a week in FrippVT. So with that, Paul, you will put the pop-up for tomorrow's meeting, which you can share with your friends if they would be interested. And we have our opening lines. Was that what they picked, Paul? Opening lines, yes, for next time. So remember, get your opening lines ready for us to critique and give feedback. And that will be on the 5th of October, which is a Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific. So with that, thank you very much, Melanie, for already starting the conversation in our LinkedIn home on our FrippVT LinkedIn location. Thank you, Paul. As always, we could not do it without you. And this is Patricia Fripp reminding you, life is a series of sales situations, and the answer is no if you don't ask. However, the clearer and more concise you're asking for the business, the more you will drive sales. See you in FrippVT.